we do, start with you, Tom, first. Where did the concept of method grids actually start?
So apologies for those of you who heard me tell this before, because I know there are some that have, but there is probably a little bit of a sort of story here, obviously, to describe how it even became a thing. So where to start? So I built and eventually sold a management consultancy business, eventually sold it to BT. And as is the case with those builds, you have like typically an earn-out period. I finished the earn-out period, and then I kind of organised my succession and I stepped out of that business. And this is going back sort of, sort of 10 years ago. And at that point, it put me into a completely kind of new, career phase. And I wrote some sort of books on the topic of how you build value in a professional services context. I then went on almost organically, it was like a massive plan at this point to run sort of training retreats for leaders, owners of professional service companies. And then that led to me being a sort of non-exec advisor chair for a whole raft of those kind of businesses. So over the next kind of few years, I probably spoke, definitely getting close to 100 businesses that were trying to grow and build value in a professional services context. And it was a really unique, very privileged insight. And what sort of really hit me was, invariably you're speaking to very, very smart, driven, bright people. And to a person, they all get that at the heart of that journey is having structured, methodological, intellectual property that is differentiated to you as an organisation. Because with that, you can scale. You can recruit coherently, you can train and onboard people, get them productive very, very quickly. You can differentiate against your competitors to win work because you actually have a corpus of knowledge and expertise. It just imbues value all over your business. Everybody gets that point intellectually. However, what you then see, almost without exception, is basically badly organised SharePoint and a plethora of slide decks. I was like, this is a really interesting kind of disjunction. And then, if I'm honest, I went into this little reflection of, on my own experience. I was really lucky. I kind of paused and sort of thought about it. And my first client was Transport for London, actually, when I was building my company. I worked for a great guy, Peter Hendy, who people have tracked his career, is now the Minister of Railway. It was a fantastic, very visionary-driven guy to work for. But essentially, he was bringing in project management discipline into his part of Transport for London at the time. And so we had the challenge as a small consultancy company to help him with that. And if I'm honest, we tried all sorts of different ways of embedding structured knowledge. And a lot of those kind of routes didn't work very well, but we landed on a very, very simple, visually, schematically obvious way of getting across, complex methodology. And all of a sudden, it just landed. And the community then, there was probably 1,000+ engineers and exec, just everybody landed on this one way of doing it. So I was like, wow, that's interesting how that's really worked. And at the time, we then took that back to the ranch for our own business. Pre-SaaS days, we had to spend a lot of money building our own platform, but essentially to then start building out our own methodology as a company on this platform. And I would credit that as being one of the key reasons that we grew and scaled so efficiently. So I was like, wow, that was probably quite an unusual, idiosyncratic experience. For those people I'm speaking to who do genuinely want to land this, technology is never the panacea, but technology at that point where you've got leaders who actually get it and want to build it, actually has a massive role to play. And when I thought about it, I was like, well, there isn't really any platform that really supports that. So that was the little, sorry, long-winded, the little twinkle in the eye as to, this is something here. I had previously worked with Tom as a designer on, actually, Tom designed my books, didn't you? The graphics and the covers and the books. And I'd worked with lots of designers previously, and Tom stood out. I was like, wow, brilliant designer, I love working with Tom. And I think I then spoke to Tom and I said, look, I've got this twinkle of an idea. Do you want to sit down and let's talk it through? I was the chairman of a company at the time called CIL. The guy there was leading their knowledge side. I mentioned it to him, he was super interested. His name was Liam. Liam joined the conversation, and we gathered in my home office against a big whiteboard, and I started conceptually drawing it out. And that was the graphic of what I had in my mind as to how you could build a platform that would allow people to facilitate. So we had that session, and then through Tom, we previously had done a project Joni and Ian involved in, essentially to build a kind of website and other bits and pieces. So I think following that session, you know, the other chap in the room was like, if you had this, we would definitely be interested. We're like, right, do we try and build something out, part-time, side of desk, you know, just in the evenings and the weekends? And I think we gathered through a conversation that, guys, there's no business here, there's no, you know, we don't know where it is, but how about a bit of a collective punt to build this out and then see if there's a beta test?
Yep. To be, your kind of first, I mean, it wasn't called Method Grid at the time. What was the kind of first Method in a Box?
Yeah, Method in a Box.
Method in a Box was its first name, yeah.
Cool.
And the folder of the code still lives in to this day. It's still called MIAB because it was Method in a Box. Tom drew up the initial designs. I think we probably got the first grid design maybe on the next slide.
Yeah, well, we started with Method in a Box and then it quickly changed to Method Grids. And then first sort of brand new ideas. And then if you go to the next slide, that's the first go at the grid design and some of the app design, which is what we built to start with. That was the design and
that's beta 1.
The colour palette that went out to the private beta group.
So Ian and I built that in the evenings alongside our full-time jobs. And I met Ian when we worked together in Nottingham, and I've known Tom for years. I went to university with Tom's brother. That's how long we've known each other. And we built this first prototype, and then we sent it out to the beta use companies, and it quickly realised that this version was not going to work.
It was a private beta group initially. I think it was, you know, largely probably 15, 20, you know, people, firms I knew, just sort of, you know, kicking us around to us, I think, and Jeremy Rebelio, all others, very early.
It still looks like the grid, doesn't it? But we had this guidance column to start with. And then the big issue was we decided that everyone would make a template first. So you have templates in Method Grid before you have to have one of those first before you can even add an element. But of course everyone just goes to the grid and starts trying to build it out and add elements, which you couldn't do until you had a template, and everyone just came to a crashing halt. So user experience in that first beta was a bit of a problem.
Like, I guess the feedback was, we love conceptually where this is going and what you're doing. The design is not great. Rethink the design was essentially the message back.
So we went completely back to the drawing board and we designed version beta 2, I suppose it was.
Which is that, explored colour palettes and all sorts, and went out to the community and got feedback, re-listened to what was working and what wasn't working, and then redesigned it really.
So at this point, it's still completely non-commercial. There's no business. This is just for folk tinkering around, really, getting a perspective on it. But at this point, I think we went out to public beta. We opened it up. If anybody wanted to kick it around for free, you could just come in and look at it.
But the inkling of kind of feedback was overwhelming.
Definitely. It was definitely moving positively that we are potentially onto something interesting.
And then, sort of phase 2 then, out of beta, what were kind of next steps?
I think because we set ourselves a little bar, we said, look, you know, what would it be that actually takes us into a bit more of a serious mode with this? And it was, you know, X percentage of the feedback is positive that we're getting from beta, and, you know, along those lines, and it was overwhelmingly so. So then we had this kind of, right, you know, it's past the test of what we said it would be. You know, are we going to do this or not? You know, at what point do we kind of commit to it? I think you can see that around there, sort of early 18 when I noticed. You probably, you know, anybody that ever gets involved in building software or product knows there's risk all over the place, but it's kind of with this data we're getting back, we couldn't get more positive signal that it's worth a very serious go. So yeah, I think we incorporated spring 2018, again just the four of us, and yeah, that was the sort of formal moment, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And then out of beta, then obviously you formed what we've come to know, which is Method Grid. I suppose from your experience, then when did you feel like it was starting to take off?
When people started to pay for it, I guess. It was the big moment. Yeah, we finally had paying clients. We'd started to market it, and it was becoming a business. And we'd been through the pain, Ian and I, of building the billing system. which is something, of course, as soon as you commercialise, you've got to put all the payment platform into it, which was no mean effort. And yeah, that was it. We were sort of up to sort of 10, 12 paying clients at that point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, hundreds, if not getting into thousands of you know, free to use, and that's, you know, the interesting thing when you build a software business out is trying to navigate what is the optimal commercial model. And there's the classic sort of it's a freemium model, and it, you know, free and pulls you into high features. So essentially, that's where we started.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearly the key bit is that there's somebody that's prepared to, you know, put their hand in the wallet for the value it's going. And yeah, some quite quirky use cases at the time. Though. So it was sort of, I think people that know the platform know that it, you know, and this is all a double-edged sword for us in some ways, that the utility of it is so broad that the spectrum of use cases becomes so broad. So yeah, that you can get excited by that, but at the same time, it becomes almost too broad. But yeah, we were seeing some you know, good solid use cases that people were paying for.
And it's sort of evolved to what we know now. I think we obviously had our kind of first website, early slides. Kind of Malcolm was.
He was our mascot to start off with, yeah, meditating Malcolm, because he was sending all his processes. You know, that was the idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, he still lurks around a little bit, but he's generally been phased out, hasn't he?
And again, we've had a lot of internal debate about that, but he was everywhere at one point. You know, the classic sort of SaaS route is, you know, you have sort of fairly junior SDRs, they're sort of on the phones, you know, emails trying to get, you know, meetings set up to be able to do demos, and then, you know, then you go into demo mode. And, you know, there is some software that literally can sort of fly through that process in a couple of weeks, but it's sort of fairly simple, kind of quite tactical software, and in some ways you almost like have to give that model a go, because yeah, you just have to sort of see if it's, you know, what success is going to be for our product. It became really evident quickly that was not the right model for us. You know, we invariably speak to very senior kind of, you know, executive around the capability uplift that this platform enables, and it's a serious professional topic. You know, you can't execute it with, you know, a couple of young folk on the phones kind of thing. So we navigated to it being much more of a professional service-led sell and implementation, which is the right place for us. But yeah, working our way through that was a challenge in the early stages.
I think marketing was always a real challenge to start off with as well, because I mean, it was just the four of us who were trying to do all aspects just between us, and trying to find the right tone of voice, and you know, getting some recognition and getting some sort of audience was a real struggle. And we dabbled with freelancers and found that they couldn't quite hit the right tone of voice either. And then we tried agencies, it was expensive, and still it was slightly up, you know, better than the freelancer, but still not quite. They didn't really understand the product, they didn't really understand what we were trying to do. So it was only when we actually got to the position where we could hire a dedicated marketeer that we really had some success. You know, someone who actually understands what we're doing and is living it every day, and you know, really has that focus. It's made all the difference. So I think that's a real challenge, not having that marketing capability really, and just outside resources are sometimes a bit of a
quick question on that for me, Dom. At this point, I did get the nod to ask the question before. At what point did you actually coalesce on what that defined end client problem statement you were fixing was? When did you come around that? How many iterations did you go through to get to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's probably jumped forward a little bit around in switches. No, it's a good question. It's taken out in that, you know, what Tom's describing, sort of, you say, don't know if you ever crack, but we definitely evolved the marketing kind of sort of approach into a much better place. But we still had quite a wide, you know, variant of user. And, you know, I'll talk about, I think it's a slide, but we had a real kind of right, you know, from a strategy perspective, we've really got to focus here. You know, again, we're at one point it's still, you know, largely the four of us, and you've got to remember our environment is largely playing against the behemoths that are largely American backed. You know, there's this little kind of, you know, team in the bricks. It's like, you know, we cannot be all things to all people with our small team. And there's quite a seminal book that was written about 20 years ago. It was Crossing the Chasm, people have ever heard of. If you're ever involved in any kind of product-based kind of company, yeah, I say it's been around a long time, but it has real seminal kind of, fundamental axioms, and that is, broadly speaking, it's a bit more sophisticated, but you've got to absolutely lock down to a point of focus that's almost uncomfortably narrow, and then win that first market, because what you've got to generate is kind of genuine case study and user benefit that then gets talked about, in that world, and then you can move to adjacent sectors. And I remember reading it, and I read it years ago, but I reread it and was like, this perfectly describes where we are now. We're way too broad for a small company. And the obvious one for us was AEC, because I think we'd already, we work with great companies, Mace, I think Turner and Townsend was sort of using it at that point. And you could see that their operating environment, because it does have quite a lot of stricture, it has a lot of regulatory kind of backdrop, that the more kind of organised the backdrop was, the more relevant our product was. So it makes so much more sense for us to lock down into that AEC use case.
Yeah. So I live in Nottingham, Jodie lives in Falmouth, and we've got Tom and Dom in Bath. So when we started it was my key challenge was everyone working fully remote, and then obviously COVID hit, and then we started to hire people. So we've got Odell wherever he is, he's hiding somewhere, there he is. Odell lives in Spain, Mark lives in Liverpool, and Mihal lives in Peterborough. So we're all fully remote, so it was challenging, like remote onboarding people, making sure that the dev team is connected to the whole wider team as well. But we have just been exceptionally lucky with the quality of the dev team that we've actually got. So, as I say, Mark's doing a PhD on AI. Mihal moved here several years ago, and Odell was actually thinking about moving to Bristol with his girlfriend. But at the moment he's in Catalonia. So it was just making sure that as you increase the size of the dev team, that you just stay connected. So communicating with them very often, making sure that the onboarding process is solid. And I've never worked remote before we did this, so it was a bit of a challenge to try and figure out the right balance between communicating with the dev team, but without hassling them too much and talking to them too much. I just let them get on with their job.
You are connected to it, I think, because when we run these events as well, it's what I've been always impressed when I first joined is just how well kind of devs connected. But we're always at our events, but so please meet them, because essentially it's allowing them to connect with our clients, our customers, understand the problem. We just want our devs, everyone in the business, to feel connected, but they kind of know the problem that we're trying to solve. So please do make the opportunity to kind of say that. So, Jodie, your kind of key challenge?
I think, for me, which I was surprised about, is how much billing and the way you charge for the platform has been like a constant struggle. I mean, there was a kind of a joke between me and the dev team and all of us that every year we would change the billing system and have to rebuild it from scratch each time, because there'd be a different idea about how we're going to bill it. We started with the freemium model, and alongside that, of course, you've got to restrict features. You've got to restrict them, which was adding all this tech debt overhead, and then we would change it. And for a while, I think we hit it now, but for a good 4 or 5 years, we would change it each year and change the features that were there. It was freemium, it's not freemium, it's based on seats, it's not based on. We changed it so many times, and it was a real challenge each time. It feels like, oh, we'll just change it to this, but it would always end up taking, like 3 months to reconfigure the platform to work with this new billing system. I think, at the time we get the challenge, we've been trying to get that right the first time if we can. You save yourself a lot of late nights.
We're on version 5, aren't we?
We are on version 5,
I think we've landed on it. Yeah. Try and do it in one or two instead.
Yeah, try and do it in 1 or 2, maybe not 5. Yeah.
Are there any kind of sort of personal kind of takeaways, lessons learned, advice that you would give? Sort of, because it is scaling a kind of small British SaaS business. Anything that you would kind of pass on?
I'll go first. We, sort of used this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. And for me, you know, a lot of experience in the professional services scaling world. And if I'm honest, one of the sort of reasons for kind of holding hands with, you know, co-founders and going for it was that I had very little, if not nil, experience of building a product-based business, and I was kind of intellectually curious as to what the differences are in a product business to professional services context. And I just thought it's kind of refreshing to go to the bottom of the mountain again and not have the answers, and, you know, realise you've got to learn fast. But the commonality for me is, you know, that's universal, is when you're trying to build a business, at the heart of it, you know, is the team, the people. You know, as Ian talked about, maybe made it more difficult with the sort of virtual working piece as well. And at the heart is the culture of that team, and at the heart of that is the sort of the values, the kind of behavioural code that you sign up to. And you know, we did have a conversation very early doors about, look, if this goes, it'll be other colleagues down the line. You know, what values do we really want to embed in this business? And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And those values for us are not just sort of mealy mouthed, some words on a wall above the photocopy. We genuinely kind of live them and embed them in the team. And I think, almost regardless of the business, what you're doing, that for me has been the key learn, is that is the sort of central spine of how we build out.
Anyone else?
I would say that from a design point of view anyway, my background was branding, print especially, you know, towards the end I was doing a lot more websites, so responsive design came into it a little bit, but it's the holistic design approach really, because I'd never done an app before really, so it's really getting into the shoes of the user and really understanding their pain points, trying to empathise with them, you know, and how the design goes across all aspects of the app itself, then, you know, the marketing and the website, everything. It has to be really consistent, really coherent, and you just got to, you know, really think about, especially in the app, all the user experience, all the triggers, all the sort of human behaviour, everything. And that was all quite new to me when we really started the app in earnest, and I think that's probably my biggest lesson. Totally different approach to design.
Yeah, for me it would be the human aspects of the whole journey, making friends along the way. I've known Jodie now for 14 years. And I've now known Tom for 10 years, and obviously Dom as well. But it's like with the dev team and with the organisation as a whole, I know that I could go for a beer with any of them, go for a meal, would have things to talk about. So for me, it is the human aspect, making friends along the way, and just enjoying the journey.
For me, it was when it was just the four, when you're kind of in this crazy founder mode, when it's just four of you kind of, and when it's just two of you building a product, I was doing the front end, he was doing the back end, you're so fast, you're just like, oh, I'm just going to change that. Off I go, I'll just go and do it. The transition from that to the bigger team and having a big dev team, which I've worked in before but never had to manage before, I think it's so important to get right. And I like to think, he says, looking over at the dev team, that we have got that working pretty well at the moment. And I think that was the key moment, the flip there for me, when you suddenly go from just the four of you working together as friends to 15 of you, and everything that comes with that. Make sure you plan for that, because it just happens overnight. It seemed like.
Okay. Right. So reflecting then, and in business terms, please. What would you snog, marry, avoid in terms of method for this journey?
I'm hoping I get this metaphor right. Definitely advise, it's good practice, is using our own platform for ourselves. I mean, very, very early on, we were like, well, clearly we should adopt this because, you know, then we're the ultimate user. So we really embedded it, you know, in our own practice, and actually, you know, for Jodie running the sort of product release as a sort of Kanban board, you know, it's absolutely critical. But, you know, you won't be surprised to hear that all of our processes, you know, and practices are embedded in method grid. So I think early doors, where maybe it was potentially a little bit contrived in the very early days, so we've got to use our own platform. So that for anybody who's building a product, that's quite a key one. Marry for me again the values point. Like, you know, if you ever build any business, just, you know, clearly everybody says the cliche people are important, but you've got to really, really double down on that, particularly with, you know, values-led cultures. And the avoid, yeah, back to that point really, for us, definitely that sort of, you know, trying to sell in that sort of slightly kind of contrived way, but also, some of the people may remember this, we were quite agnostic about the implementation. We were always early doors, we'd say to a client, look here, buy the license, good luck, let us know if you need any help. Never ever going to do that again. You know, we are very, you know, clearly latter year clients will know, very, very collaboratively involved in that early implementation. It's so key.
I think my slog would be listening to the user, getting them involved in concepts when they're first designed, so that you make sure you're on the right track with how a feature is shaping, and whether it's answering the pain points, that sort of thing, solving the problems. I think that's really important. Going back to the holistic design point, really. My marry would be, I think, building internal capability where you can, because that experience with marketing especially, it's been transformed to turn Tom on the team, and, you know, same with dev team, it's just really, if you can, it's really good to have that internal capability. And like avoid, I think we have to be complicated designs, got to keep things simple, got to keep things logical, you know, sort out the user journey. If you're confused by your own design, then it's not going to be very good at solving people's problems. So yeah, keep it simple.
So my snog would be code improvements, reducing technical debt, and moving forward with new technologies, just to make sure that we're always at the peak of what we can be. My marry will be server runtime, security, performance and stability. We aim for the 5 nines every single year, 99.99% uptime. We do it, but because we've got the stability, we've got the performance, and I might ruffle some feathers here, so I do apologise if I do. I will avoid .NET and Java.
That'll mean nothing to some most people.
For me, my snog would be, we decided, I mean not straight away, but fairly early on, that we would dedicate time for the dev team to be able to do R&D and just kind of do anything that they want in that R&D time within reason, within the method bounds, you know, fill the data out. But, and that worked really well. That's worked and continues to work really well for us. A lot of our key features, particularly AI, have come out of those R&D sessions. So I think that's quite important. The marry, we're quite lucky in that we use method grid, but it has worked really surprisingly well for delivering dev projects. We focus on the AEC, but we use it ourselves to deliver every release. And I think it's been important, especially with the remote team, to have that central place where we manage it. And it's worked very well for us. And avoid, it's back to the bidding in some ways, but avoiding the really massive code releases. They would quite often happen with the bidding that it would just touch every bit of the app. And Katie, our test engineer, is not here today, but she will, whenever you say it, I'll just test everything. You know, it's like, you can't really do that. So those kind of smaller bite-sized releases are much more effective and much quicker. And we've learned that over time. Sometimes they're unavoidable. Sometimes you are just going to hit everything. That's just the way it is. But definitely bite-size is better.
All right. Final question. We'll open it up. Anyone's got any other questions? What would sort of next chapter, kind of, what would you like to see from that?
Stay in the same alignment. I mean, for me, just, you know, client case studies are everything for us. You know, we feel genuinely as a small team so privileged to be working with, you know, the likes of some of the companies and organisations in the room, and people have obviously tracked out and worked with, you know, Network Rail as an example of, you know, really sort of UK PLC, you know, strategic kind of endeavour. We're doing increasingly some really interesting work in the energy renewables space. You know, and for us, it was like that was the vision of enabling, you know, multidimensional complex organisations to navigate, traverse complicated method in a coherent way. And when you see it being done to an ultimate end of such import, it's obviously massively rewarded, but it's validating we're going in the right direction. So we feel very lucky to be where we are, but just increasingly those kind of those case studies, more of those.
Again, from a design point of view, I think I'd like to see a revamped Prod Hub hit the app, because it's got a lot of potential and it's not been realised yet. I think it's a really nice thing to revisit and improve. But from just like a general company point of view, we've been shortlisted for a few awards this year, which is great news, but it would be excellent to win one and get that national recognition. I'd be really proud to see that happen. After all these years of hard work.
And also, particularly, some of the awards with Network Rail, the validation of the collaboration, I think, is huge. Prod Hub, by the way, is sort of it's our internal, but it's like the kind of almost like a homepage that individuals come into. And we feel we can just do a lot more with that productivity enabler.
Yeah, sorry to look at it perspective.
Yeah, so for me, what I'd like the next chapter to be would be to increase the size of the dev team, increase the use and knowledge of AI within the platform. But yeah, I'd like a bigger dev team so that we can actually push more features out faster. Because sometimes it does seem as though it's a little bit too slow. But yeah, that's my mind.
I'll go on with that, because I mean, mine would be a similar thing. Sometimes the fact is, the bigger the product gets, the more complex it gets.
Yeah.
So when you put a new feature in, you have to think about everything else that thing touches. And the more of these you've got, the more you've got to think about. I think what I would like to see us do a little bit is take some time and kind of revisit. You're always reaching for that next big feature, and you've got to remember that a year and a half ago that feature was that next big feature. You've got to go back and, you've got loads of feedback about that now. You've got to find the time to go back and revisit it and make it better, put all those improvements in you've had. So yeah, which will be helped by being a dev team.
Yes.
Yeah, anyone ask any questions?